So the title was really to be food as medicine, but somehow it got lost in translation as food is medicine. But it doesn't matter because really food is medicine anyway. And the I guess the what happened for me, I'm from Argentina, big beef eating country, and came to America in '65, and the food didn't taste as good as it did over there because everything there was like local markets, and here it's like big supermarket and wrapped and poisoned, and um, what else would you call it? I mean, it's processed. So it was kind of a shock because also for me it was like I didn't have the happiest childhood, and food was like love. So I used to just pig out. I would have beef every day and pasta, big desserts. It was like I was getting a lot of my juice out of pigging out on delicious foods. And I was young. I had a strong metabolism, so I wasn't too chubby. It was like working out. Then I came to America, and it was different. The the taste of the food, because we were still eating at home. In fact, my stepfather was a gourmet, and so there was more consciousness started to go into food. And then I finished high school, and that's when really the kind of the alternative food started happening. I had my first all vegetarian meal in 1969. Was a member of this organization, and this girl Robin Kilson put together this meal where we all had this banquet of maybe, I don't know, I don't think it was organic, but it was definitely just salad, kind of shredded. It was very ornate and pretty, and I came away feeling very hungry. It was like it was just not what I was used to in terms of meat and stuff. And then I finished high school. I tried going back to Argentina and couldn't make a go of it because I was already Americanized. It's kind of a hippie, and theirs was a bad copy of what was happening here. So I came back, and I didn't really go into school. I tried going into like a college for 3 days and left. I was going to study nutrition. But in Boston, there was a really strong movement because Michio Kushi lived in Boston, and he's like the foremost master in America of microbiotics. And in fact, you could take classes at BU, I think, for $1.50, evening classes, $1.50 a shot, which I did. So that's where I learned yin-yang theory and macrobiotics, and there were a couple of restaurants in the area that were into microbiotics. And that's essentially what it deals with, is the balance, is the creative polarity. Everything in creation exists through polarity. There's like light and dark, and good and bad, and male and female, and cold and hot. And, it's all polarity, and nothing really escapes it. And your body falls out of harmony when you are out of balance with between the polarities. So the real aim to attain health or to preserve health is to find the balance point. And they in macrobiotics, they categorize foods into different, either, like there's a chart, 0 in the middle, negative on one side, positive on the other, and all foods fall somewhere in there, and the idea is to go for the foods that are more in the center. And the most central of all the foods is brown rice, because it's balanced also in terms of acid alkaline, and it's balanced in terms of yin and yang. And there's many veggies that fall in the middle as well. So if you're vegetarian, and you can do with a diet of basically fish also, like particularly white fish, not red fish. Red fish tends to be more young. Then you can pretty much maintain balance, and he would actually treat people for disease according to the theory of yin and yang. As a matter of fact, I was living in Boston, and I was a bit of a stoner, really pretty out there. And I remember I used to like to drink some red wine because that's what I learned to do when I was in Argentina growing up. And I wasn't a drunk. I never could get into alcohol. I was more into pot, hallucinogens. And the one day I had some nosebleed. So I knew where he lived, and unannounced, maybe at, I don't know, 8 o'clock or something like that, I just happened at his door. He lives right by Route 9 in Brookline. And I rang the doorbell, and somebody came out, and maybe one of his kids or somebody, and they said, just a minute, and he came out, and it's like a bit intrusive, but he said, he asked me, what is it? And I said, well, I have some nosebleeds. And so he took my hand, he felt my pulse, he looked in my eyes, and he asked me to stick out my tongue, and he looked at it. And then he said, have you been drinking wine? And I said, yes. And he said, well, too much yin, and he went upstairs, and he took a little piece of toilet paper and put it in his toothpaste. And the macrobiotic toothpaste is burned eggplant, roasted eggplant with salt, which is actually very young. So I had a yin condition. He took that piece of paper and stuck it in my nose, and it immediately contracted the capillaries, which were expanded because of my yin intake. And the nosebleed stopped instantly. And he said, don't drink so much wine. And that was it. There was no charge for the visit, which is unheard of. People today wait a year in line to talk to this guy, pay him $500 a shot, and I don't think he spends, half an hour or an hour with you for his consultations. So I would go to the lectures, and what I learned essentially was to stay away from foods that were harmful, and to not throw my diet too much out of whack. The teacher that he had, whose book I read, was called George Osawa. He's Japanese, and they had this book called You're All Sanpaku. And sanpaku is this Japanese word that describes this condition of having the lower part of your eyes, the whites, showing. So they had a picture of Kennedy, and they were saying this guy was headed for the grave, Jack Kennedy, because of the condition that his eyes were had all this white underneath. They were saying that as you get ready to die, that's essentially what happens. And they have tremendous amount of knowledge about your constitution. For example, if your earlobes, if you have large earlobes, that means that you have a particularly strong constitution. The bigger your earlobes, the stronger your constitution. Constitution meaning like your, I don't know how to say this.
Bone strength?
No, it's, constitution is like the health of your organism. So A strong constitution means you have a very healthy organism. You will tend to live a very long life. And then they had other things. I don't remember them all, but or if I picked that up there. But if you have like a little parting between the front top two teeth, that means a good thing also. Like you're a great soul or something like that. And then the right brain, left brain thing sort of crosses at the heart and then goes back down. So people that are right-handed tend to be a dominant father figure, have a dominant father figure, or their male side tends to be dominant. Whereas if you see people that are left-handed, oftentimes their mother is very dominant in their personality. And they just had a lot of this sort of wisdom. And macrobiotics wasn't only about the food, but it was also about like the principles of living. They would say that a great man is not known by his great works necessarily, but by his day-to-day living. That it's like a river could be very wide, but if it's very shallow, it dries up in dry season. Whereas there are some rivers that they may look like brooks, but they're very deep, and those rivers run deep, and they have like integrity. And they were saying that your actions, not just how it looks to others, but how you hold it inside, what you believe in and how you conduct yourself is really key. As a matter of fact, he has this thing called the Book of Do In, which I finally got a copy of, and I didn't know it at the time. But one of the things that happened was that I began doing service, not getting paid, at this other restaurant, which is a kind of like a student hangout, and it was called the Route 1 restaurant. And I met some people there that were into Guru Maharaji, who was teaching meditation. And the Mishio Kushi was teaching exactly the same techniques this other guy was making such a big deal about. But I never knew it, so I actually learned it from this other guru, And so it was a whole path to health, both mental, spiritual, and physical health, and also treatment of disease, although obviously with the pressure from the AMA, they must find some way of getting around it so that they don't get, busted. And then it seemed to apply to everything. Like everything was either yin or yang. And I employed it a lot. Like I went to Argentina in '73. I traveled by land, and I tried to eat things that were sort of in tune with it. But I also found, in my own personal experience, that after being vegetarian for 10 years or something, I got very ill. I got everything. It was like hypoglycemia, candida albicans. It was just kind of a mess. And so they really tend to ignore people's constitution and your ancestral makeup. And the way that your organism works is that it's kind of tied to what your genes are and what your history is. And those are the foods that you're going to function best with. There's a book by this doctor or something or other about diet according to your blood type. And I think that the older blood types, like O positive, O negatives, are meat eaters. So if you're a meat eater and you're out of a concept trying to simply follow some diet which is vegetarian, your body is not going to go for it. So you have to find the actual thing that works for you. You know, you have to experiment around and also get in tune with your organism to know what it is that resonates with you. And one of the things that has helped me a lot is to meditate. You know, I used to, you know, like when I got into this Guru Maharaji, they were pushing vegetarianism, and people were, you know, you weren't supposed to eat meat. And I thought that my experience was somehow tied to my diet and that I should remain a vegetarian. But I found that that wasn't at all true. You know, that your body has a life of its own, and it needs what it needs in order to be healthy. And so when you get in tune to what it needs, your mental state actually improves. You know, and so does your experience in meditation and whatever else you're doing. So it's best to not ignore your physical body or your emotional body or your spiritual body, but rather to find out what each one is calling for and to get in tune with it. And diet is kind of a big thing. But I'm feeling like, you know, with all of the kind of concepts that we all have about diet and stuff, I'd like to just entertain questions, you know, or ideas that people have about diet and health, and do that rather than just chat around forever. So the what do you call it? The thing is open. The floor is open to any questions or comments about diet or nutrition or health or dietary choices.
Like, I have a question. Like, how do you know if your body wasn't meant to be vegetarian?
Well, the way I found out was I was vegetarian for like 10 plus years. And, you know, at first I had hypoglycemia, which is a condition prior to being diabetic. And what happened is that if I took any sugar, and I still do to this day, well, it was worse then. If I would eat something with sugar in it, I would tend to get a headache, and I would not feel very good at all because my body was reacting adversely. So it was a sugar imbalance. And then another thing that happened to me, and these were subtle things to pick up on what was going on. Another one was the yeast disease, what do they call it? Candida albicans. You know, so I had this one flora that would normally stay in control. It was kind of out of control. So I was feeling extremely weak. I was like functioning out of willpower. But I was feeling kind of headachy and out of sorts, just not having a whole lot of strength or stamina. And then more recently, like for a few years, I started to experience a lot of pain, kind of like a tennis elbow. You know, I'm a painting contractor, so that was very difficult because you have to raise your hands and brush and roll and spray and have this. So I was in a lot of pain in my bones, and I had a lot of sensitivity. I had very little stamina. I had a lot of depression. I was a wreck, and I found out that I had something called cytomegalovirus, which is a form of like mononucleosis. It's also very highly undiagnosed stuff, and there's no treatment for it. In fact, I had it diagnosed in Argentina, and a friend of mine who's a pediatrician said, I don't know why they test for it at the hospital, because they don't have any treatment for it. They put you on antidepressant medication. But I did some research and I found out that fulvic minerals were a key part of boosting your immune system. And in fact, that's the key to health, is not so much to treat the disease the way that allopathic, general Western medicine tries to approach things, but to actually strengthen your immunity overall. And that are the grounds that are being used for cultivation are highly depleted of minerals, so that the food that we tend to take in does not have the mineral component that our bodies need to be at their top health. And with minerals, there's many kinds of minerals. There's like this blood-brain barrier that they have to go through, and all, it's like getting just the right kind of mineralization is very key. So I found out that something called fulvic minerals is actually the key component, without which a lot of these other things, like how the omega, you've heard about the omega-3, 6, and 9, all of these other things that you take, without the central component of fulvic minerals, don't really help you as much as if you take the fulvic minerals and then make sure that you're getting other stuff in your diet. So once I started to mineralize, to remineralize, I started to see a tremendous improvement in my stamina, my mental state, the less pain that I was experiencing, etc. To where I'm actually pretty healthy at the moment.
Yeah, I've had my own little sort of nutritional experience, and for me it's sort of been an exploration thing, because just moving from home and having to live on my own and cook my own meals, and I've always sort of grasped onto the idea of trying to do portions and a little bit of everything, a little bit of meats, a little bit of carbs, and eventually though, the diet just gets crazy because you're trying all these new foods and you realize that your digestive system is accustomed to certain things, and so some things end up being heavier than others, and for me, this at this sort of particular moment, we had a potluck at my house with my roommates, and we all made a meal. It was enough food to have just had that meal and share it. So there was a lot of food, and there was about 5 of us, and we had the idea of being multicultural because we're all from different ethnicities. And I was overwhelmed and over happy, and I got really carried away to the point where I literally could not sit. I tried walking, and I was just in so much pain on the interior, and my lining is used to really light meals at home. We never really cook anything that's too heavy on any fatties or anything. It's always been pretty light. If anything, fast foods, that was about it every once in a while. But my roommates were accustomed to heavy meals. We had like eel sushi and like really fat stuff, and I cooked up some of my Mexican dishes, and as well as like some steak and everything. So my body was overwhelmed, and the next day I felt the acidity reach my system, and I had never experienced acidity. I had sort of digestive problems, but in terms of just like gases and everything, but never an acidic thing. And so that was just like slightly, I felt a little bit uncomfortable when I would eat certain things, And then eventually, and that's also under a lot of stress at that time. So I learned afterwards, that increases your acidic in your stomach. And so
Right.
eventually I went to Mexico for the winter, and there was a lot of different meals as well that, they were just experimenting. They were doing stuff that I wasn't used to. And at the time I was sort of like taking part-time of a vegetarianism in terms of just red meat. And they thought that was really odd, and so I had it again for the first time in like probably half a year. And my stomach was not happy at all, and so I got, I guess, what I ended up finding out, possibly like a stomach flu. And the day of New Year's, I was throwing up, and they were trying to force it to come out of me because I felt like I wanted to, but I couldn't do it on my own. So they forced it out, and I came back home not being able to eat a lot of things. I would eat, just little bites of bread or something, and I would feel full. So that was really frustrating, because I loved food and I couldn't have it. So I knew I was lacking that calorie intake because I would just eat a couple of things and go about my day. And what ended up helping me, I was trying to, doing my research, and then I kind of accidentally ended up going vegan. And because those meals were a lot lighter and a lot less processed as opposed to, the other stuff that I was trying to eat, it allowed me to have a bigger calorie intake. And I was going at the time also to doctors, and nobody could give me an official diagnosis. Everybody was saying it's some sort of, something with your acid. So they all wanted me to prescribe me a whole bunch of pills to lower my acidity. And I tried them because, I just wanted an option. But I noticed that it was just sort of, my system was just kind of getting accustomed to it. And I just needed stronger pills every time. So by the time it was like my third one that they were, upgrading, I was like, no, this is enough. It's not, you're not trying to, fix the problem and tell me what it is that I have and how to fix it. So I continued on with my veganism for a little bit, but at the same time it was really hard because I didn't have those options. There were meals that I wasn't accustomed to. So instead I started doing a bit more just eating raw, eating a lot of raw stuff, and that did strengthen my digestive system. And but I did eventually find out, like what you said, that your body's sort of accustomed to certain meals, and there's certain meats that if it's in sort of your genes to have, your body asks for them. That's when you have to pay attention to what, because your body is always screaming for what it wants. Sometimes those cravings that you get, like, oh, I really want that apple, it looks really good. It's because it's screaming out, I need something fresh. And so I've noticed that the red meats, that I think my body, because we eat it so light all the time, it's only been an occasional thing, it's been fine with. But I do feel that I lack my sort of fishes. We were very much relying on fish. But at the same time, I've noticed that I think I'm just very sort of conscious about where it's coming from.
Right.
And I know that it's not having that same strength of nutritional value as it did perhaps some years ago. And it's just, it's still not cutting it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what's your lineage from?
My parents are both from Mexico.
Okay. So, and they were more into fish, their particular?
Sort of more on my dad's side. They were. On both sides, we've been very heavily on birds, different types of birds.
Yeah, I mean, the deal with fish is that farmed fish is pretty toxic.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they have a lot of, I forget what it is, but when you put all the fish together like that, it's like a poisonous environment. And also, they're not like swimming, to survive, so they're very high in fat. They're not like lean, full of the normal, omega-3, 6s, all this stuff. So farm fish you want to stay away from. And on top of that, you know, the fishing has really depleted marine life tremendously. Like, I saw a picture in the paper taken from 1959 in the Florida Keys, and some people had gone fishing, and they had these fish that were like huge, you know, like the place was packed, you know. And then there was a picture like recent when people had gone fishing and there were just a few fish and they were like scrawny little things.
Yeah.
So we have like decimated the environment in terms of what was there to what's there now. And on top of that, there is a lot of pollution, you know, like certainly right now you don't want to be eating fish from Japan, you know, but beyond that there's mercury poisoning and different things. So I think the rule with that generally is if you can find out, you know, where the fish is from, you want it from deeper waters. They're generally less polluted, more far out to sea. But fish is good, you know, it's like if you can find it. And there's something else you said that sort of struck it out, but I can't remember it. I can't retain it. Well, one thing with the meat, the diet too, is like it's good to know also like I also have problems sometimes with reflux, you know, the acidity that you were talking about. Now, I've never taken pills for it because I know not to do that. You know, like I will not take pills because they all have side effects. It's like they generally suppress one thing, but they get you in another place because they're really normally pharmaceutical products which they're interested in making a profit out of you more than they are in your overall health. So the whole allopathic approach to medicine is more about treating the symptoms, that's where the money is, not necessarily raising your state of health. So you have to watch them. So the ways that I've dealt with acidity, like I love drinking mate in the morning, you know, and it's highly acidic. So they have some mates that are mixed with herbs, and they're not so bad, but they don't really get you off either, so I blend them. But what I do after drinking mate is I have orange juice. Because although citrus is acidic, when it goes into your organism, it actually turns alkaline. So I think there was one time that I had an ulcer, and the way I dealt with it was by drinking citrus, grapefruit juice particularly. And it was, because it was this incredible pain. You know, it was like this burning, I mean, it's horrible. And I was able to like keep it under wraps, but every like 10 minutes I had to do that. So that's one thing, is to balance when I totally throw it out of balance. And then find out what other foods are alkaline, like figs and dates, and there's some foods that are more alkaline than others. Definitely leafy greens, you know, green vegetables, they all tend to be more alkaline. Like even the seaweed, you know, is also alkaline. Those green drinks, they're all alkaline. So it is true that red meat can bring on acidity. I think it's like your body's able to digest things. Like when you take in meat, your body goes, oh, I have to digest this heavy stuff. So it's going to produce more hydrochloric acid. But it also has to do with the meat itself. Like if you eat grass-fed beef, it doesn't create that. The problem is that because of profit gain, they generally feed us grain-fed, corn-fed meat, you know, which is with these cows that are just like confined to a space like this, hooked up to stuff, have a miserable life.
Corn is genetically modified.
It's genetically modified, right? So that it's like there's a whole lack of integrity in how the animal is treated. You know, it's just seen as something to eat rather than a being that deserves to enjoy their life, and you're taking all of that in. So when I buy meats, because I love meat, is I try to stay away. Well, I have difficulty eating stuff from like the supermarket because I tend to get a bit of a headache. It's kind of synthetic. I mean, I'll occasionally go out to eat, and that's pretty much what they feed me. You know, when you go to a restaurant, they just buy commercially. But when I buy meat for myself, I try to buy meat at Henry's if I can, you know, their signature beef, which doesn't seem to do that to me. Or I found that halal, you know what halal means? Halal means allowed in Muslim, you know, and it's part of in Muslim religion, they have a different way of treating the animal. Like they don't believe in just beheading them like that. They say that you have to cut particular artery in their neck. So I found that if I buy halal, allowed meat, I don't have that adverse reaction. And there's some markets.
How do you spell it?
Halal. There are some markets here in San Diego, most notably Vine Ripe. Have you ever been to Vine Ripe Market where is it? La Mesa?
No, it's Grossmont, isn't it?
Grossmont
The Grossmont
area. I love that place.
Yeah.
It's like a happening place. The energy is really nice. They have this variety of stuff, a lot of stuff from the Middle East. They have a lot of like different kinds of meat, and they're all halal, you know, and their prices are decent on produce as well. So that's a fun market to go to. And near my
halal has anything to do with like organisms' response? You know, it's got to be organisms' response to that treatment. So like if they go through suffering directly before death, meaning not killed the right way, then maybe their body responds in the
I
way
think
that
the
it sends
real
something.
problem with commercial meats is that they're raised with antibiotics
Yeah.
across the board to prevent disease. Then they're fed these GMO or something which contains herbicides, you know, which is poison. Then it's like the whole thing is sick, you know, the way they're transported is sick, the way they're raised is sick, the way they're killed is sick, the stuff they're fed is sick, the concept behind it is sick, you know. So you're eating all this disease, and it's hard to just transmute it. Whereas these halal, they seem to have, like, you know, there's kosher, funnily, although they hate each other, kosher and Arabs, they're really essentially the same people, you know. So you have like kosher meat that is supposed to be at a higher level as well, and maybe not quite as poisoned as much, but then they found that one outfit somewhere in Chicago or someplace that was kosher, but it was terrible. It was just, yeah, there was a big ado about that. It's just supposedly blessed by a rabbi. It's like, who cares? You know what I mean? I don't, you know. So to me, it's the integrity of the product, you know, and the way it's raised, what it's fed, you know what I mean? How it's seen that makes a difference.
I mean, the hard part with all that is, how do you go about figuring all that out? You just you look at the thing,
Well,
you start researching on the internet, all the little pieces and
well,
parts. And
here's the thing. What happens to me, it's like after I've eaten.
So you have a response to it.
Right.
You can tell.
After I've eaten the stuff, I feel kind of toxic. I'll get kind of a headachy thing, and I won't feel well the next day, and then I have to go through like this purge and cleanse cycle, you know, to get rid of it in my system. So it gets to the point that when I touch the meat or I look at it, there's a memory in me that goes, you know, it's like, I don't want to go through that again. So
Yeah.
you just develop a sensitivity at some level, like a knowing as to, you know,
I think it just starts happening the moment you start having those meals that do have that nutritional value you need. The bad thing
the
just
body
does.
responds.
Yeah, once you like start having something that doesn't have that same nutritional value, it's not the same. Like once I started having, my produce from local farms, or like stuff that was being, grown a little bit more to the earth, I have noticed that my body is just, when I don't have a carrot that's that same value, it tastes different. Your body's like, what is this? What are you giving me? It's
Right.
not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't understand the shaved tube carrot that gets sold in the bag. It tastes like water, crunchy water.
Yeah.
There's nothing in it.
So we're actually out of time, and I want to respect time because it's hard to get to everything in all these different
Yeah.
places.
So far.
So you can turn this.